By the late 80s, Anthrax had cemented their place as one of thrash metal's big four, blending breakneck speed with a rebellious attitude. But when they released the 1988 cover of Antisocial, many fans were unaware that the song's roots went back nearly a decade to a French hard rock band that had been making waves with their raw energy and politically charged lyrics. That band was Trust. Today's video is about the metal scene in the 80s in France. I will be talking about 5 bands. Feel free to drop a comment about other French bands so I can do a follow-up video. But back to the video, let's begin with one of the most important bands from France, Trust. Formed in 1977, Trust emerged as a powerful voice in the French rock scene. Their original lineup featured Bernard Bernie Bonvoisin on vocals, Norbert Nono Crieff on guitar, Raymond Ray Mana on bass, and Jean-Émile Jeannot Hanella on drums, often compared to AC/DC due to Bonvoisin's raspy vocal delivery that was compared to Bon Scott. Trust carved out their own niche with lyrics and tackled social unrest, corruption, and the struggles of the working class. Their debut single, Pompe ton flingue, which means Don't Take Your Gun, was released in 1977, followed by their first full-length album, the self-titled Trust, in 1979. However, it was their 1980 album, Repression, that catapulted them to stardom, selling over 800,000 copies. The album's standout track, Antisocial, became an anthem for a generation. Disillusioned by economic turmoil and government control, the song's lyrics, condemning police brutality and the crushing monotony of modern life, resonated deeply with listeners, earning the band mainstream radio airplay despite its hard rock sound. Success of Repression was followed by Monsieur Crève in 1981, reinforcing Trust's reputation as one of France's most politically outspoken rock acts. Their high-energy performances and raw authenticity won them a devoted following across Europe. Even Iron Maiden took notice. Both Nico McBrain and Clive Burr, who were legendary drummers for the British metal giants, played with Trust during the band's early years. Yet, despite their influences and success, Trust disbanded in 1985. The band went separate ways given the music's shifting landscape, internal pressures, and the band members' individual pursuits. But Antisocial refused to fade into obscurity when Anthrax introduced the song to an international audience in 1988. Their thrash-infused version reignited interest in Trust, proving the band's message was as relevant as ever. I know this personally because Antisocial was one of the first singles I ever heard from Anthrax. That was back in 1988 when I was about 17 years old getting into heavy metal. I didn't know it was a cover song until many years later when I happened to hear this French version. This is back in like 2016 when streaming was available. And then I spoke to somebody online about it, and he said that it was a cover song from this band Trust. So that's something that's pretty cool because Antisocial is a very important song for me because it is one of the first singles that got me into heavy metal. But let me go back to the story. I was able to listen to a few of their other songs for the first time. I liked what I heard. Had a lot of energy. It was almost like punk rock with a fast rhythms, but also had a hard rock or traditional metal sound with lots of guitar riffs. I couldn't understand the AC/DC comparison, but there were a few songs I heard that, such as the track Ton Dernier Acte, which means Your Last Act, from their album Monsieur Crève. If I didn't translate it before, that means Walk or Die. I thought they were close to maybe early Iron Maiden, but like I said, they had a few drummers in common as well. But Trust was not the only French metal band in the early 80s. I still have 4 more bands to talk about. So let's talk about the days in 1981. 5 musicians came together with a shared vision to forge new sound in the French heavy metal scene. Christian Augustin took the helm as the voice of the band, while Daniel Lap's thundering bass lines provided a solid foundation. The twin guitars of Stéphane Dumont and Didier Desmagens carved out melodic yet aggressive riffs, and Jean-Philippe Bob Dumont commanded the drums with unrelenting power. They called themselves Blood Waves, but they would eventually change their name. So by 1982, the band sharpened their skills and built a reputation through electrifying live performances. Their growing presence in France caught the attention of major touring acts, and they soon found themselves opening for Def Leppard during the band's tour in France. Yet, despite their momentum, French record labels remained skeptical unwilling to take a chance on them. Undeterred, the band looked beyond their homeland and secured a deal with a Dutch label, Ravon Records. With a fresh start, they embraced a new name, Sortilège, which means sorcery in French. That same year, the band entered the studio to record their debut EP, Sortilège. Upon its release, the EP resonated with fans, gaining traction in France and beyond. Encouraged by the success, the band signed with the French label Madrigal to set their sights on an ambitious full-length album. Weeks later, they traveled to Germany to bring their full-length album, Metamorphose, to life. This album proved to be a triumph, finding a devoted audience in France and Germany. It even reached the ears of an aspiring young musician across the Atlantic, who is Chuck Schuldiner of Death. He was really captivated by this band's intricate compositions. He cited them as one of his primary inspirations, mostly the track Amazon. I was able to listen to that track. I could hear a little similarity with some of the guitar playing. I thought it was a little similar to some of Death's later works. The track was more of a heavy metal or power metal track, but also had some speed metal elements as well. As their reputation increased, Sortilège found themselves on the stages of Europe's most renowned festivals, captivating audiences in Germany, the Netherlands, Switzerland, Belgium, and their native France. However, as their ambitions grew, so did their concerns. Believing that singing in French could limit their reach, the band recorded that album Metamorphose in English, but it didn't really do as well as they hoped for. Sales were lackluster everywhere, pretty much, except Japan for some reason, but they found a very loyal following over there. But despite the setback, the band pressed on. In 1986, they returned to Germany to record what would be their final album, L'Armée des Héros. Once again, the English version was produced, yet it didn't really do as well. Frustrated by the industry's lack of support and disillusioned with the challenges of securing a sustainable future, the members of Sortilège made the painful decision to part ways that same year. Although many years later, in 2019, they would reform, was able to listen to some of their more modern material. They still sound really good. I think this band just really slaps. It's like a really awesome heavy metal band, so I definitely recommend you check them out. Their older stuff and their newer. Back to the story. We're in Paris, and we're talking about the early heavy metal of the 1980s, and here's another group. They call themselves ADX, which is a metallurgical term called acier doux, which means soft steel, a fitting contrast pretty much to what their sound would be. So their journey began in 1984. They released their first demo. They quickly gained the attention of France's underground metal scene. The buzz around the band led to a deal with Devil Records, and in 1985 they released their debut album, Execution. From the start, ADX set themselves apart by singing entirely in French, which is something that was kind of rare at the time because a lot of bands were singing in English, except for a lot of French and Spanish bands, which I talked about in a different video. But this band was pretty heavy. They had the high-speed riffs, galloping rhythms, anthemic choruses, and they did pretty well with metal fans. But as the decade progressed, they became known for the live performances. They even released a live album in 1988 called Exécution Publique, and that really captured the raw intensity of their concerts and solidified their reputation in the French metal scene. However, despite their growing influence, internal struggles and lineup changes began to take a toll on the band. But then they ended up breaking up around 1992, and that was it. I was able to listen to their 1987 album, Supremacy. So it's some pretty solid 80s speed metal, but I still have another band, and this is another band that really didn't last too long, but let's talk about them. So this band came from the city of Lyon and started by guitarist Jean-Marc Dufour, bassist Phil Gutenbel, drummer Eric Gutenbel, and vocalist Gerard Tardy. Also keep in mind, I'm not a French speaker. I've been trying to practice with some of the names, but I'm not getting them all. But anyway, the name of this band was called Blasphème, and they were pretty cool. So they drew inspiration from bands like Iron Maiden and Judas Priest, and they crafted this unique style that fused traditional heavy metal with elements of speed metal and progressive rock. The music was very intense. It resonated with their fans, And their lyrics delved into mythology, fantasy, and existential struggles, which kind of gave them a darker, maybe a poetic edge to their sound. Their breakthrough came out in 1985, and this album solidified their reputation as one of the most promising metal acts in French. They had these energetic performances, they had a growing fan base, and they seemed poised for success. They were able to blend melody with aggression, and they had these distinctive lyrics. And that really set them apart from their peers. But despite this momentum, the music industry, we all know it's very difficult, and there were internal pressures from the band, and they ended up breaking up. I have one more band to talk about, and they made their mark on the French metal scene, but they didn't really make it out of the 80s either, so let's talk about them. This is a band that came out in the late 70s. They're from the city of Bordeaux, and they had a lot of raw energy, and the name of the band was High Power. So they're from this French metal movement, along with the other bands I was talking about. So they had a sound that pretty much blended the intensity of traditional heavy metal, but with these infectious melodies. The music was heavy but accessible, lots of those galloping riffs, soaring vocals, anthemic choruses. This resonated with fans, and their reputation grew quickly, and by the early 80s they became one of France's most exciting metal acts. In 1983, they released their self-titled debut album, High Power, and this record met with critical acclaim. It showcased their powerful songwriting and cemented their place in the French metal underground. I listened to a few of the tracks, thought it was some pretty raw heavy metal. It was a lot of fun. And they had a follow-up called Les Violons de Satan, released in 1986, and that really truly captured the essence of the band. That one had darker themes, a more refined sound, and expanded their fan base and solidified their legacy. Despite their growing success, internal struggles, and shifting musical landscape, they disbanded in 1987. So those are a few of the bands that were part of the French metal scene in the 80s. Drop a comment with a few other French bands you want me to talk about, and I'll include them in a future video. In the meantime, check out this video right here from their neighboring country of Spain, where I talk about many different bands, also some bands from the 80s. In the meantime, thanks for watching. Give the video a like. It helps me with the YouTube algorithm. Please subscribe if you're not already. I do rock and metal reviews, rankings, and more. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.